Giving an Answer, the show dedicated to defending the historic Christian faith. I am your host, H.E. Felder, and today the topic is God and Science. And to talk with me about this, I have a special guest, Prem Isaac. Let me tell you about Prem. Prem has an undergraduate degree in physics and computer science. He's a graduate of Southern Evangelical Seminary. He has a Master of Art in Apologetics. We went to school together, as a matter of fact. He has taught on this very topic at seminaries and at universities. You just got back from a trip talking about this very topic, so I imagine you're pretty beefed up on it. Have I missed anything?
No, that's I'm very passionate about this topic, and within apologetics, this is sort of my field, and I love to speak to middle schoolers, high schoolers, adults, churches, university students, just about anyone on this subject.
Okay, you want to say hello to anyone?
No, not particularly. Everyone.
Yes, you do. You want to say hello to your wife?
Yes.
I don't know why I got to go through this with you guys. Okay, you can say hello to your wife.
Hello, Annie.
Okay. All right, well, let's go ahead and let's get to it. Prem.
Yes.
Are God and science incompatible?
Absolutely not. Several scientists who are both believers in God and very good scientists in their own right have existed both in the past and in the present. We can think about Isaac Newton, Michael Faraday, and today John Polkinghorne, and even Francis Collins. These are examples of men who are dedicated their lives to science, but also dedicated their lives to God. Now, in addition, the position I hold is that science actually points to a creator. Science points to God, okay. And there are several ways of showing how science points to God. On top of that, if we look at Western society and look at the rise of science in the modern world, it is the case, without any doubt or question, that Christianity first permeated the Western culture to lay a foundation upon which science could really take off. Right. Other cultures have dabbled in science, but science never took off in cultures where their worldview wasn't the Christian worldview.
That's a very good point, because not every worldview is compatible with science. As a matter of fact, Christianity is, because it tells us, that there's a God that created order.
Yes.
And it is out of that order that we have these natural laws, that we can look at the natural laws and we can determine things about nature.
That's correct.
So if you just had a God who was just willy-nilly and things were just happening willy-nilly, then you really science couldn't really evolve in a society like that. Also, I'm going to go back and touch on something you said a little bit earlier about scientists and Christianity. And people just assume that scientists are naturally non-believers in God or atheists. Right. Because I worked for 8 years at NASA. And at NASA, I mean, there were scientists who were atheists, but there were also scientists who were believers. As a matter of fact, we had a Bible study every week. And in that Bible study were scientists. So they obviously did not consider Christianity and science incompatible.
That's correct. Yes.
So, but why do so many people think then that science has disproven God?
Well, there are some very good arguments, it would seem, on the surface as to why this is the case. But we can show these arguments don't really hold water. Well, one of them is that in the pre-scientific world, we had various religions, and the religious worldview was used to explain natural phenomena because we didn't understand enough about how nature worked. For example, we could have a drought or a famine, and we didn't know how to explain those things because our knowledge of science had not reached that level yet. So in the various religious views, it was due to some god or goddess or demon or angel or a combination of those that thunderstorms happened or hurricanes or the river overflowing the banks and destroying the crops. People attributed all these phenomena that they couldn't understand to gods and goddesses and spirits and things like that. Right. So with the rise of science, natural explanations were found for these phenomena. So now we know what makes a hurricane happen. We know why the riverbanks overflow. We know what causes the spread of disease. So it would seem as though the word God or spirit or angel is no longer needed to explain these phenomena. And what has happened is that as a result, most people have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah. To say that, so therefore there is really no God at all. Right. So this is one way in which science has appeared to discredit the existence of God. The second way is the theory of evolution. So this has more to do not with the natural phenomena we observe, but with the origin of the universe. Where did the universe come from? And the origin of life and living things. So all religious views have always held that the universe has come from some divine source. There's some either single god or multiple gods and goddesses that were responsible for the creation of the universe, or perhaps the universe itself is somehow divine.
Right.
So these are the views that have existed. But once the theory of evolution has took hold in Western society, it appears that even to explain the origin of the universe and the origin of life, God is no longer needed. So therefore, that's another reason for people believing that science has rendered a belief in God to be irrelevant.
But is that really true? I mean, because for instance, when we talk about evolution, and people want to use evolution as a way to sort of like discard God, but evolution doesn't explain a lot of things. Evolution, even if it were true, does not explain where matter came from.
That's correct.
And it doesn't explain how you go from matter to life. So then, how does science deal with those issues?
Well, that's the whole point, is that evolution is more of a dogma than a proven scientific theory, the way gravity or electromagnetism works, where we can conduct experiments repeatedly to test the theories that we create. Evolution is more a theory to the best explanation, but it's predicated on naturalism, meaning that those who hold to the theory of evolution must first, not because of science, but before they do any sort of scientific inquiry, they must first be committed to the idea that there is no God at work.
Right.
And then after that, they try to explain where and how the universe came from and how it has evolved and how life has been generated. So evolution is contested even today by non-believers.
Yeah.
There are people who are not particularly Christians, or at least do not have the agenda of promoting religion, who don't think that evolution works.
Right.
So this is very important for people to know, that not all scientists believe in evolution.
You mentioned earlier that science actually supports the idea that God exists.
Yes.
Explain that a little bit more.
Sure. The first argument from science is called the cosmological argument. So the cosmological argument is also known as the argument from causation. So what does that mean? Well, any event that we observe has a cause. So the simplest example would be billiard balls. If you have a billiard ball, a stationary billiard ball, and another billiard ball hits this first billiard ball, it would send it off moving in some direction. Well, what this tells us is that the reason why the billiard ball that was sitting still started moving is because it got hit by another ball.
Right.
So the event was caused by something else. So all events that we can see, that we can observe, have a cause. And on top of it, if you look at any object, let's say this table, or perhaps this mug, if any object that we know had a beginning, then it must have had a cause. So
Right.
that's as simple as saying that this mug didn't pop into existence
Right.
out of nothing.
Right.
We know the mug wasn't always there. So the question of how the mug came about, well, can't be answered by saying the mug just showed up out of nothing on its own. There were causes behind the mug. You could talk about the shape of the mug, the blueprint in the mind of the person who was going to make the mug. You could talk about the material cause of the mug, which would be the ceramic. You could talk about the actual manufacturers, the agents, the machinery that was used. These are all causes that existed before the mug existed.
Right.
And they're what's responsible for the mug coming into existence. So if you think about the universe as a whole, not just a mug, but a table perhaps, or planet Earth. Planet Earth didn't always exist,
Right.
so it needs a cause. And a bigger entity like the solar system, with all the planets revolving around the sun, well, we know the solar system didn't always exist. There's
Right.
plenty of evidence for that. So it needs a cause. And if you open a textbook on astronomy, the textbook will try to give you theories on what the cause of the solar system was, or what the cause of the moon was. So everyone understands causation from common sense experience, everyday experience, that objects don't just appear uncaused. Okay, so if something has a beginning, it has to have had a cause. So now that then means that if the universe had a beginning, it needs a cause that is not part of the universe.
Right.
Okay, so that's how we can show that science supports the existence of a supernatural cause by showing that the universe, in fact, did have a beginning.
Right.
That's the part that where science comes in. So today we have Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity that shows us that the universe had a beginning. And this is a widely accepted theory today in physics.
Right.
And we have other evidences for the universe not being infinitely old. So an example of that would be the fact that Edwin Hubble noticed that the universe is actually expanding, meaning that as you go, if you were to play that videotape of the universe in reverse, the universe would have been much smaller.
Right.
And so that means that you could actually go back in time and shrink the universe down on that video to a point, and even smaller than a point where it didn't even exist. So Edwin Hubble's observation and the echo from the Big Bang that is supposed to have happened several billion years ago has been noticed by people today using a variety of instruments. So there are various lines of evidence to show that the universe had a beginning. So the point here is that if the universe had a beginning, then it needs a cause.
Right.
Now, what do we mean by the universe? Well, the universe can be thought of as matter, which is all the stuff, all the atoms, protons, neutrons, electrons, and molecules. But the matter needs space to be in. And the matter is always in motion. It's always changing and moving. So it needs space to move around in. So the universe is space and matter. And by the fact that matter moves, we can measure time. An example would be a pendulum, a grandfather clock, which has a pendulum in an enclosed space. And as the pendulum, which is made of matter, moves around in that space, back and forth, we can count seconds off and we can tell the time.
Right.
So the universe is all of these things. It's all the matter with the space in which the matter resides, and time, which can be measured by noticing how the matter changes. Well, that's what we mean by the universe. It's space, time, and matter. And it's organized according to certain laws. It's not just willy-nilly, like you said. There are laws on how matter interacts with itself and with space and with time. So if all of that, the universe as a whole, didn't exist, then according to the law of causation, it needs a cause.
Right.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Right. So now, what can we know about that cause? Well, that cause couldn't be made of the same thing the universe is made of.
Right.
Because we're saying that the universe and all its matter didn't exist. Well, the first cause of the universe then is not made of matter.
Right. It has to be outside of the universe.
Outside of the universe.
In order to cause the universe.
That's right. That's right. And it's also outside of time.
Right.
And it's outside of, it doesn't occupy space.
Right.
Okay, so that would mean that it's eternal. To be outside of time is to be eternal.
Right.
Okay, to not occupy space or not be composed of matter, we have a word for that. That's called spirit. The word spirit is the word we use to describe something that is real, it exists, but it doesn't occupy space. It's not physical.
Right.
So we're talking about a first cause that's spirit, it's eternal, and since it is not composed of matter and doesn't occupy space, there's no space for it to move around in. So that means it doesn't move, which means it doesn't change. And the word for something that doesn't change is called immutable or changeless.
Right.
So we have a changeless, timeless, immaterial spirit first cause that's responsible for the universe. You cannot explain where the universe came from without recognizing that there has to be a cause outside the universe whose characteristics are different from the universe, from the characteristics of the universe. So that would be one way of showing how science points to a creator.
Yeah, another thing that the beginning of the universe shows is that whoever created the universe had to be powerful.
Yes.
Because you're talking about taking nothing and creating all of this, the galaxies, the universe, all of this came from nothing. So this person or this being had to be incredibly powerful, all powerful.
That's correct.
And not only that, had to have volition. Because this being had to make a decision, had to decide that I am going to create the universe. And as we said before, also since he's outside of the universe and time is part of the universe, then he had to be outside of time, so he had to be eternal.
That's right.
when I was an atheist, and I was a professor atheist, and I was in the Navy, one of the things that used to trouble me the most was when I would go out to sea. Because when I would look up at the stars, and I would see the universe, I would know that I didn't do that. I would know that nobody I knew did not do that. So that always stuck in my head. That always gave me an issue, and I will always have to fight against that in order to maintain myself as being an atheist. And it's scriptural, because then when you start to read the scriptures and you read Romans 8, and it talks about how God is letting himself be known from his creation so that all men are without excuse. That is exactly what was happening to me.
Yes.
And that is exactly what is happening to all mankind. So when someone says that there is no God, when he looks at the heavens, that person is in some serious denial.
Yes.
So, but yeah, you could go on to the next one. I just want to just...
Sure, absolutely. The second way in which science supports the existence of God is known as the design argument. And the design argument is just a statement that says that the universe seems to be designed. And if it seems to be designed, it would mean that there has to be a designer. So simply put, if we were to walk into the forest and find a watch lying on the ground, one of those older, old-fashioned watches, and we notice that it's decorated on the outside, it's got the hour hand, it's got the minute hand. No one in their right mind would think that the watch formed itself or came to exist out of random natural forces. The very fact that the watch is designed and has an intelligent function points to a designer, a watchmaker. So in the same way, if we find a painting somewhere, we would automatically infer that there's a painter. So the point here is that design is recognizable. We are always able to recognize design. So you could look at shapes of mountains and recognize that a lot of these mountains have been formed by natural processes, by erosion, by wind, by volcanic activity, by the folding of the Earth's crust. Or you could go to Mount Rushmore. And Mount Rushmore, you'll see actual faces carved into the rock. Well, no one in their right mind would think that Mount Rushmore is a result of volcanic activity or of just the natural forces that have worked on the surface of the Earth. Mount Rushmore looks like it's been designed.
Right.
So all we have to do is look at the design in the universe, and you realize that you cannot account for it using any other method except to say that there must have been a designer. Now, we can do this by looking at the laws of physics themselves to see how well they're put together, and how, if the laws of physics were any different, even slightly different than what they are, that life would not have been possible.
Right.
So that's known as the anthropic principle, where it looks like the universe has been fine-tuned in such a way as to permit life to exist.
Right.
Because the universe could have been made, could have come into existence in a number of ways, and most, if not all of those ways, except for the way it is actually, would have prevented life from existing. So why is the universe fine-tuned like that? That's a puzzling question that scientists have struggled with and have not been able to answer. Now, I can focus on one more aspect of design which modern science has shown, and that is DNA.
Yeah.
So imagine that you have 26 letters of the alphabet, English, and I asked you to write an instruction manual on how to build a Boeing 747. That instruction manual would be several thousands of pages long. Now, supposing I told you that I'm going to take away 10 of the letters of the alphabet and reduce the alphabet from 26 letters to just 16, and ask you to write the instruction manual for the Boeing 747. That's a tougher job, because you have less varieties of words that you can make, and your instruction manual will be even longer as a result, because there's only so much you can say using the words themselves. There's less words. Now, what if I took off another 12 of those letters and left you with just 4 letters? You can imagine how difficult that task would be.
Yeah.
And yet, we find that DNA, which is microscopically small, contains instructions for all the diversity of plant life and animal life. It contains instructions on how to build wings, how to build eyes, how to build brains that can store years' worth of memory,
Yeah.
And even gender, male versus female. and even distinguishing individuals, which is why if you find DNA in a crime scene, it can locate which one of the 6 billion or so people on planet Earth was either the victim or the perpetrator.
Right.
So the DNA contains such detailed instructions to account for every single individual, for the gender, for the species, for the variety of every single living organism on Earth. And it is made of just 4 alphabets, or 4 letters, as it were, because there are only 4 proteins that you can vary. So you just have, it's like having an alphabet with 4 letters, and you're told to do all of that just using 4 letters of the alphabet.
Pretty impressive.
Yes, and how would anybody look at that and say that that's not designed?
Right.
Okay, so DNA to me is one of the strongest evidences that there must be a designer. And if the designer couldn't be human, because we ourselves our bodies owe their existence and their design to DNA also.
Right.
So it has to be something other than humans. Someone suggested that, you know, aliens brought DNA.
Yeah.
Well, then the obvious question would be, where did the aliens come from?
It doesn't answer anything.
Yeah,
right?
it doesn't. It just sets up an infinite regress.
Yeah.
Because you could say the aliens, the alien planet had got its DNA from another alien planet from somewhere else, and you just set up a chain of causes which explain nothing. You have to have a first cause that explains how everything gets started.
Yeah.
And so that would be a designer. So if you combine that with the first argument, the argument from causation, we find that the first cause is infinite, without limit, powerful, intelligent, without a body, without space or time. And that would be hitting home, because that's exactly what the Bible teaches who God is.
Right. But then what about quantum physics? Because from what I understand, quantum physics proves that, you know, maybe things aren't as ordered as we think, and that there's an argument against God.
Sure.
Explain what quantum physics is.
Sure. Quantum physics can be contrasted with Newtonian physics. And Newtonian physics, simply understood, is the physics of everyday moving objects. And the way that works is that the moment you know where an object is, let's say you take a ball, and the ball gets hit by a baseball bat. If you know the speed of the ball when it gets hit, and you know the direction in which it's going, and you know its location, those are 3 things about the ball. If you know where it is, how fast it's moving, and which way it's pointing, you can tell where that ball will be for all future points in time. You can tell how high it will go, how far it will go, where it will land, with exact precision. So in other words, the pathway of the ball is determined by the laws of physics, and we can know in advance where that ball would be. And that applies also not just to a small ball, but to the planets. We can tell when the planets will be, where they will be, their exact position. We can create a calendar of when Jupiter will come closest to the sun. We can create a calendar of when the next lunar eclipse would be, when the next solar eclipse would be. These are all determined by the laws of physics. Well, that's how everyday physics works. However, quantum physics deals with physics of very small objects, objects which are so small that you cannot see them.
Right.
So microscopic or subatomic particles. There, at that level, it appears that we are not able to create a theory that would explain where these particles will be. Even if we know where the particle is at the moment and how fast it's going, we are still unable to determine where the particle will be for future points in time. So that means that our theory doesn't yield a definite answer as to the pathway of these tiny particles. What it yields are probabilities. Okay, which means there's a 50% chance that this particle will be at this location, but there may be a 30% chance it may be somewhere else. That's the best that quantum theory can do. Now, the problem here is that some have taken that, okay, a statement about whether we can know where these particles will be, and that there are limits to our knowledge about the particle, which is an epistemic issue, and converted it into a metaphysical issue, which means they think that the particle itself is weird, that the particle itself is behaving randomly and erratically. So there's a difference between us not knowing where the particles are and being able to only assign a probability, which we do even in everyday life. We say things like, well, there's a 30% chance that this plane is going to be late. Or we say there's a 40% chance there'll be a hurricane. Well, that doesn't mean that the hurricane is random. It means that we are unable to tell for sure. So with our limited knowledge, the 40% is really about how little we know.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is it really has nothing to do with the fact that they're random. We just don't understand the pattern.
It has nothing to do with the nature of the particle.
Right.
It has to do with the fact that we are unable to tell what the future of that particle will be. And that's a limitation on us, not a limitation on the particle.
Okay. Well, we only have 1 more minute. I just this last question I want to ask you.
Sure.
We talked about this God that we can look at science and we can say, okay, this is the same God that correlates to the Bible. The only problem is that this God just seems so static. He seems so, you know, generic.
Yes.
But how does this God correspond to the God of the Bible, which is more of a God that's relational, a God who answers prayer, a God who loves us? How do you reconcile those two gods?
Yes. We are created beings, and we are part of the universe, and we are part of the flow of time. We are within time. We are temporal beings, and we change. So from our perspective, God is relational because He responds to us. We pray today and He may respond to us. He may answer our prayer tomorrow. However, because God is in eternity, He's outside of time, He already knows that we are going to pray to Him. And He already knows what His answer will be to us. And He has a fixed will. So if He loves us in an eternal, unchanging way. So that means that even from the foundation of the world, He has loved us. And we find that in Jeremiah 33, it says, I have loved you with an everlasting love, a love without beginning or end. So we find that these attributes of God that we have touched on, which are His timelessness or eternity, His spirit nature, His changelessness, they are actually compatible with His relational attributes, which are His love, His responsiveness, His will to do what is just, holiness, and things like that. In fact, the reason we can trust Him and have faith in Him and have confidence, put our confidence in Him, is because He's unchanging. And that's what He said in Malachi, to Malachi. He said, I am the Lord, I do not change.
Good point. However, we've come to the end of the show, and I want to thank you for being on the show. Prem Isaac talking with me about God and science, and that will end this episode of Giving an Answer. Be sure to join me again next week, and until then, goodbye and God bless.